The spit landed on her cheek before she understood what was happening. Dr. Nadia Vasquez stood in the emergency department lobby of St. Raphael's Medical Center, her scrubs still damp from a 12-hour surgery that had ended 17 minutes ago. And a man she had never met was screaming into her face with the particular fury of someone who had spent his entire life being told yes. "I said, move!" the man repeated, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the ER like a blade through gauze. He was tall, mid-40s, wearing a cashmere overcoat that cost more than Nadia earned in a month. His shoes alone could have paid her student loan installment. His face was sharp, handsome in the way that expensive grooming makes men handsome. Sculpted, maintained, radiating the chemical confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything important. His name was Vincent Ashford, heir to Ashford Capital. Net worth, $1.2 billion, give or take whatever the market did on any given Tuesday. And his wife was in the back of the ambulance outside, bleeding. "Sir, I need you to step back," Nadia said. Her voice was steady, despite the exhaustion sitting behind her eyes like sand. "The trauma team is already—" "You're standing in the hallway doing nothing while my wife is dying." Vincent grabbed Nadia's arm. Not a tap, not a nudge, a full grip that would leave bruises shaped like fingerprints. He yanked her sideways, slamming her shoulder into the wall. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Her clipboard hit the floor. A nurse 20 feet away gasped. "Do you know who I am?" Vincent said, leaning in close enough that she could smell the bourbon on his breath, the cologne underneath it, the entitlement soaked into both. "I fund this hospital. My name is on the cardiac wing. When I tell you to move, you move. When I tell you to operate, you operate. When I tell you to breathe, you ask how deep." Nadia's shoulder screamed with pain. She looked at his hand on her arm, the grip tightening, the knuckles white, the Patek Philippe watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Take your hand off me," she said. Vincent's face twisted. Not with anger, with offense. The particular offense of a man who'd been told no by someone he considered beneath him. He spat, directly into her face. The saliva hit her left cheek, ran down to her jaw. Warm, deliberate. The kind of act designed not to injure, but to degrade. To remind a woman that her body wasn't her own when a man with money decided to use it as a canvas for his contempt. The ER went silent. Not the gradual quieting of people losing interest, the instant crystalline silence of shock. Nurses froze. Orderlies stopped mid-step. A patient on a gurney turned his head to watch. Vincent released her arm. He straightened his overcoat. He pointed one manicured finger at her face. "Get my wife the best surgeon in this building. Not you. Someone who matters." Then he walked toward the trauma bay like he owned it. Because, in his mind, he did. Quick favor. If you've ever been degraded by someone who thought their money made them God, tap like and subscribe. Because Vincent Ashford just destroyed the only person who could save his wife's life. And the next 48 hours would teach him a lesson no amount of money could buy. Nadia didn't move for 6 seconds. She stood against the wall with spit drying on her face and a bruise forming on her shoulder and the taste of something metallic in her mouth. Not blood, just the chemical residue of adrenaline and humiliation mixing on her tongue. Then she wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, picked up her clipboard, straightened her scrubs, and walked to the staff bathroom. She locked the door, turned on the faucet. Let the water run hot. She washed her face 3 times. Once to clean it, twice because once wasn't enough to stop feeling his spit on her skin. She looked at herself in the mirror, dark circles under her eyes, a bruise already purpling on her upper arm where his fingers had dug in. 37 years old. Top of her residency class at Johns Hopkins. Fellowship in neurosurgery at Mass General. Board certified in both neurological and spinal surgery. One of 11 surgeons in the country qualified to perform a procedure called a posterior fossa decompression with C1 to C2 stabilization. A surgery so complex that most hospitals didn't even have the equipment for it. She'd been recruited to St. Raphael's 2 years ago, specifically because they needed someone who could handle the cases no one else could. The ones where the margin between life and death was measured in millimeters, and the wrong move meant a patient never walked again. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Reeves, the ER attending. Vincent Ashford's wife, MVA. Severe cervical fracture with spinal cord compression. CT shows C1 to C2 displacement. She needs surgery tonight, or she's paralyzed by morning. Possibly dead. Nadia stared at the text. C1 to C2 displacement. The exact injury that required the exact surgery that only 11 people in the country could perform. She was one of the 11. And tonight, in this hospital, she was the only one. Her phone buzzed again. Chief wants you in the conference room. Now. Nadia dried her face, straightened her scrubs again, and walked out of the bathroom into a situation that was about to become impossibly, beautifully, terribly complicated. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and politics. Dr. Richard Keene, the chief of surgery, sat at the head of the table with the expression of a man trying to defuse a bomb while someone screamed instructions in his ear. Beside him was Helen Torres, the hospital administrator, a woman whose job required her to balance patient care against donor relations with the precision of a tightrope walker in a hurricane. And at the far end of the table, arms crossed, overcoat still on, radiating fury like a space heater set to maximum, Vincent Ashford. Dr. Vasquez, Keene said carefully. Thank you for coming. Nadia sat down. She didn't look at Vincent. She looked at the CT scan projected on the wall. The white-gray architecture of a human spine, beautiful and broken. The C1 vertebra was displaced 3 millimeters to the left. The C2 was fractured through the dens, the small, bony peg that held the top of the spine in alignment with the skull. The spinal cord was compressed. Swelling was visible, even on the static image. Vanessa Ashford, Keene continued, 41 years old, motor vehicle accident 2 hours ago. GCS 14 on arrival, declining. The fracture pattern is C1 to C2 instability with odontoid fracture and posterior cord compression, Nadia said quietly. I can see the scan. Can it be operated on? Helen Torres asked. It has to be operated on, Nadia replied. Within 6 to 8 hours, or the swelling causes permanent damage, quadriplegia, respiratory failure, death. Then operate, Vincent said from the end of the table. His voice carried that same commanding tone, a man issuing orders to the universe. Nadia finally looked at him. The bruise on her arm throbbed. Mr. Ashford, she said. I'm the surgeon. The room temperature dropped. You're what? Vincent's eyes narrowed. I'm the only neurosurgeon at this hospital qualified to perform this procedure. The C1 to C2 stabilization requires specialized training that 3 surgeons on staff have. Dr. Petrov is in Berlin at a conference. Dr. Matsuda had knee surgery last week and can't stand for the required 6 hours. That leaves me. Vincent's face went through a sequence of expressions: confusion, disbelief, rage, like a slot machine landing on the worst possible combination. "No," he said. "Absolutely not. Get someone else." "There is no one else," Keene said quietly. "Not in this hospital."
Not tonight.
"Then transfer her. Fly in a specialist. I'll pay for a helicopter, a jet, whatever it takes." "The nearest qualified surgeon is Dr. Yolanda Chen at Duke," Nadia said, her voice clinical and precise. "She's 4 hours away by air. Your wife doesn't have 4 hours. She has 6 at most, before the compression becomes irreversible. By the time Dr. Chen arrives, scrubs in, reviews imaging and preps, you're looking at 7, possibly 8 hours. That's too late." Vincent stood up. His chair scraped the floor. "I don't want her touching my wife." "Mr. Ashford," Helen Torres began. "You heard me. She's not operating on Vanessa. I don't trust her. I don't know her. She's—" He gestured at Nadia with a wave that encompassed everything he found objectionable about her existence. "Find someone else." The silence in the room was suffocating. Nadia sat perfectly still. Her hands were folded on the table. Her face was neutral. The professional mask she'd learned to wear during residency, when male attendings had questioned her competence, when patients had asked for a real doctor, when the world had reminded her daily that being a Latina woman in neurosurgery meant proving herself twice as hard for half the recognition. "Mr. Ashford," she said evenly. 20 minutes ago, you assaulted me in the emergency department. You grabbed my arm. You slammed me into a wall. You spat in my face. Every nurse and orderly on the floor witnessed it." Vincent's mouth opened, closed. "Despite that," Nadia continued, "I am prepared to operate on your wife tonight, because she is my patient, and her life matters more than your opinion of me. But I need you to understand something clearly." She stood up, not aggressively, just slowly, deliberately. The way she stood at the operating table when precision mattered more than speed. "If I don't operate, your wife will be paralyzed by morning. If I do operate, she has an 85% chance of full recovery." "Those are not numbers I'm making up to impress you. That's my surgical record. 67 C1 to C2 stabilizations. 57 successful outcomes with full motor recovery. No one else in this hospital can give you those numbers because no one else in this hospital has done this procedure more than twice." She held his gaze. "You can hate me. You can spit on me again if it makes you feel powerful. But right now, your wife's life is in my hands. Not because I want it to be, because I'm the only hands qualified to hold it." Tap like if you've ever had to be the bigger person when someone treated you like nothing. Because what happened next in that room decided whether Vanessa Ashford lived or died. Vincent Ashford did not become a billionaire by making decisions slowly. He processed information the way a computer processes data: fast, cold, stripped of emotion. The emotion came later, usually in the form of revenge against whoever had forced him to compromise. He looked at the CT scan, at the fracture, at the numbers Nadia had recited with the calm precision of someone who lived inside those margins every day. "If she dies on your table," Vincent said, his voice low and very controlled, "I will end you. Your career, your reputation, this hospital, everything. If she dies on my table, Nadia replied. "It won't be because I wasn't good enough. It'll be because the injury was catastrophic, and biology doesn't negotiate with money." She turned to Keen. "I need OR3 prepped in 40 minutes. Call Dr. Singh for anesthesia. He's the best with cervical cases. I want neuromonitoring throughout, and I need this room cleared so I can review the imaging properly." Keen nodded. "You'll have everything you need." Nadia picked up her clipboard, walked to the door, and paused. She didn't turn around. "Mr. Ashford, the waiting room is down the hall to the left. Coffee machine is on the second floor. The surgery will take between 5 and 7 hours. Someone will update you every 90 minutes. I want to be in the observation gallery." "No." "Excuse me?" Nadia turned now. "You assaulted a member of my staff 20 minutes ago. Yourself. You are not entering any surgical area in this hospital tonight. You'll wait in the waiting room like every other family member of every other patient. Your money doesn't buy you a seat in my operating room." She left. Vincent stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the ghostly image of his wife's broken spine, and felt something he hadn't felt since he was 12 years old, and his father backhanded him across the face for crying at his grandmother's funeral. Powerlessness. He hated it. And he hated the woman who'd made him feel it. The surgery began at 11:47 p.m. The fracture was worse than the CT had suggested. The odontoid process was tilted 15 degrees into the spinal cord. The ligaments were torn. The disc was herniated. Motor-evoked potentials present but diminished, Dr. Singh reported from anesthesia. She's on the edge. Nadia worked. Hour 1. Decompression. Removing bone fragments pressing against the cord with instruments so fine they looked like jewelry tools. Hour 2. Reduction. Coaxing C1 back into alignment with C2 using gentle traction and the kind of spatial awareness that couldn't be taught. Hour 3. Fixation. Placing 4 titanium screws with trajectories accurate to within 1 degree. 2 medial, cord damage. 2 lateral, artery injury. 2 deep, brainstem penetration. Hour 4. Fusion. Laying bone graft that would grow into permanent repair. Hour 5. Closure. At 5:23 a.m., Nadia stepped back from the table. "Motor-evoked potentials?" she asked Singh. He checked the monitor, smiled. "Normal. All 4 extremities. She's going to walk." Nadia closed her eyes. The bruise on her arm pulsed under the sterile gown. "Someone update the family," she said. "I'll be in the call room." She didn't deliver the news herself. The man in the waiting room had spat in her face 4 hours ago, and the professionalism required to give him good news was a resource she'd depleted during the surgery. Dr. Keen delivered the update. Vincent received it standing, arms crossed. "The surgery was successful. Your wife's neurological function is intact. Dr. Vasquez, I heard enough," Vincent said. "When can I see her?" He walked away without saying thank you. If you've ever saved someone who didn't deserve saving, and then watched them walk away like you were the problem, you know exactly how Nadia felt, lying on the call room cot at 6 a.m., staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep because her hands were still shaking and the bruise on her arm wouldn't stop reminding her of what it cost to be excellent in a world that measured women by everything except their skill. But the story doesn't end with surgery. Not even close. Because what Vincent Ashford did next proved that some men don't learn from mercy. They weaponize it. Vincent waited 3 days. 3 days of sitting by Vanessa's bed while she drifted in and out of consciousness, her neck braced, her monitors beeping, her body slowly registering that it was still connected to itself. 3 days of nurses checking vitals, and physical therapists planning rehabilitation, and dietary staff delivering meals that Vincent didn't touch because the food wasn't organic or locally sourced, or whatever arbitrary standard he applied to things he couldn't control. On the 4th day, Vanessa opened her eyes fully, looked at her husband, moved her fingers, moved her toes, whispered his name. Vincent held her hand and felt the relief pour through him like liquor, warm, consuming, temporary. Then he called his lawyer. "I want to file a complaint against the hospital," he said, standing in the hallway outside Vanessa's room. "The surgeon, Vasquez. She was unprofessional, hostile, and delayed my wife's treatment." "Vincent, she just saved your wife's life." "She also refused to let me observe the surgery. She was confrontational. She made threats." "What kind of threats?" "She said my money didn't matter. She said my wife's life was in her hands. That's a threat." The lawyer, a man named Douglas Webb, who had billed Ashford Capital over $4 million in the past decade, was quiet for a moment. "Vincent, I have to be honest with you. Filing a complaint against the surgeon who just performed the life-saving operation on your wife is not going to look good. For anyone. I don't care how it looks. I care about control. That woman humiliated me in front of the hospital chief and the administrator. She refused my requests. She spoke to me like I was... Like you were a family member in an emergency room? Like I was nobody." Douglas sighed. "What exactly do you want?" "I want her fired. I want her medical privileges at this hospital revoked. I want to make sure she never operates again." "Vincent, my family funds 30% of this hospital's annual research budget. My name is on the cardiac wing. When I ask for something to happen in this building, it happens." "I'll make some calls," Douglas said. "But I strongly recommend against this course of action." "Noted. Make the calls." The first call went to Helen Torres, the hospital administrator. The second went to the chairman of the hospital's board of directors, a man named Richard Carr, who played golf with Vincent every third Saturday and whose foundation had received a $2 million donation from Ashford Capital last spring. By Friday, Nadia was summoned to an administrative review. She arrived to find Helen Torres, Dr. Keene, a hospital attorney she'd never met, and, on speakerphone, Richard Carr. "Dr. Vasquez," Helen began, and her voice carried the particular strain of someone being forced to do something she knew was wrong. "A formal complaint has been filed regarding your conduct during the treatment of Vanessa Ashford." Nadia's jaw tightened. "By whom?" "Vincent Ashford. The complaint alleges unprofessional behavior, delay of treatment, and hostile conduct toward a patient's family member." "He assaulted me," Nadia said flatly. "He grabbed me. He slammed me into a wall. He spat in my face. There are 14 witnesses." "We're aware of the incident in the emergency department," the attorney said, choosing his words like a man walking through a minefield. "And we take it seriously. But Mr. Ashford's complaint addresses your subsequent behavior. Specifically, your refusal to allow him into the observation gallery and your comments during the conference room meeting." "My comments were factual." He characterizes them as threatening and insubordinate. Nadia looked at Keene. He was staring at the table. She looked at Helen Torres. The administrator's face was tight with conflict. "What are you asking me to do?" Nadia said. "We're asking you to participate in a mediated discussion with Mr. Ashford," Helen said, "to address his concerns and find a resolution that allows us to maintain our relationship with your donor," Nadia finished. Silence. "You want me to apologize to the man who assaulted me, because he pays for your research wing." "We're not asking you to apologize," the attorney said quickly. "We're asking you to engage in a constructive dialogue that—" "No." The words sat in the room like a stone dropped into still water. "No," Nadia repeated. "I will not participate in a mediated discussion with a man who committed assault and battery against me on hospital property. I will not apologize for saving his wife's life. And I will not pretend that his money entitles him to treat medical professionals as servants." She stood. "If this hospital wants to fire me to keep a donor happy, that's your decision. But you should know that my surgical record is a matter of public record. 67 C1 to C2 stabilizations, 57 full recoveries. If you terminate me based on a complaint from the man I just saved from becoming a widower, every medical journal, every news outlet, and every malpractice attorney in this state will have an opinion about it." She walked out. Keene followed her into the hallway. "Nadia, wait." She didn't stop. "I'm on your side," he said, catching up. "Torres is on your side. But Carr, the board chairman, he's in Ashford's pocket. The donation last spring came with strings: naming rights, board influence, preferred treatment for Ashford family members. If Ashford pushes hard enough, then let him push." Nadia turned. "Richard, I have a bruise on my arm in the shape of that man's hand. I have spit DNA on the scrubs I wore that night, which I bagged and labeled, because I've been a woman in medicine long enough to know that documentation is the only thing that protects you when powerful men decide you're the problem." Keene stared at her. "You saved the scrubs." "I save everything. I've been saving everything since my first year of residency, when an attending told me I'd never make it in neurosurgery because my hands were too small and my accent was too thick. I've documented every slight, every dismissal, every time someone decided I was less because of what I looked like instead of what I could do." She paused. "I'm not going to let a man who hit me rewrite this story so he's the victim. Not this time." Tap like if you've ever had to protect yourself because you knew nobody else would. Because Nadia Vasquez was about to discover that she wasn't as alone as she thought. The call came on Sunday evening. Nadia was at home, a one-bedroom apartment near the hospital that she'd chosen for proximity, not comfort. She was eating takeout pad thai and reviewing surgical journals when her phone rang. Unknown number. "Dr. Vasquez?" "Yes." "My name is Vanessa Ashford." Nadia set down her chopsticks. "I need to speak with you," Vanessa said. "In person, without my husband knowing." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm not sure that's appropriate given the current situation." "The current situation is that my husband assaulted the woman who saved my life and is now trying to have her fired. I know what happened. The nurses told me everything." Another pause. "I can come to you," Vanessa said. "Tomorrow. Wherever you say." They met at a diner 6 blocks from the hospital. Nadia chose it because it was public, well-lit, and had security cameras. Precaution she'd learned to take automatically, the way other people learned to check their mirrors before changing lanes. Vanessa arrived in a wheelchair, pushed by a private nurse. She wore a cervical collar and a cashmere wrap and the expression of a woman who was simultaneously recovering from spinal surgery and reckoning with the man she'd married. "Thank you for coming," Vanessa said, once the nurse had positioned her at the table and stepped away. "You shouldn't be out of bed," Nadia said. Professional reflex. "I shouldn't be married to a man who spits on doctors either. But here we are." Vanessa's smile was thin, painful, genuine. Nadia studied her. Under the careful makeup and the expensive clothes, Vanessa Ashford looked exhausted. Not post-surgical exhaustion, the deeper kind. The kind that accumulated over years of living with someone who consumed the oxygen in every room. "How much do you know?" Nadia asked. "All of it. He grabbed you. He pushed you into a wall. He spat in your face. Then he threatened to destroy your career because you had the audacity to save my life without his permission." Vanessa's hands trembled on the table. She pressed them flat, steadying herself. "This isn't new," she said quietly. "The rage, the need to control. The way he treats anyone he considers beneath him, which is everyone. I've watched him berate waiters, threaten employees, reduce people to tears because his coffee was 2 degrees too cold. Mrs. Ashford, he hit me once." Vanessa's voice didn't waver. 3 years ago. We were at a charity event. I disagreed with him in front of a colleague. In the car afterward, he backhanded me so hard my ear rang for 2 days. Nadia felt her stomach tighten. I stayed because I was afraid. Because his lawyers wrote a prenup that leaves me with nothing if I initiate the divorce. Because he controls the money, the houses, the accounts, even my phone plan. He monitors my location. He reads my texts. The nurse outside right now reports to him. Then how are you here? I told her I needed to see my surgeon for a follow-up question. She didn't argue, because even Vincent's employees understand that contradicting a post-surgical patient is above their pay grade. Vanessa leaned forward. "Dr. Vasquez, I didn't come here to make you feel sorry for me. I came because I have information you need." She opened her purse, slowly, the collar limiting her movement, and pulled out a USB drive. Vincent recorded the conference room meeting. He has a habit of recording conversations. It's how he builds leverage against business partners. What he doesn't realize is that the recording captures everything. His demand that you not operate. Keene explaining you're the only qualified surgeon. Your statement about the assault. Everything. Nadia looked at the USB drive. He gave a copy to his lawyer to use in the complaint against you. But the lawyer's paralegal is my cousin. She made a second copy. That recording proves that Vincent Ashford delayed his own wife's emergency surgery because he didn't want a woman he'd just assaulted to be the one holding the scalpel. In any malpractice review, in any board hearing, in any courtroom, that recording proves everything. Nadia picked up the drive. It was small, black, unremarkable, the kind of object that changes trajectories. There's more, Vanessa said. On that drive is also a file of communications between Vincent and Richard Carr, the board chairman. Texts, emails, discussing how to pressure the hospital into terminating you. There's a specific text from Vincent that reads, she paused, remembering. Get rid of her by Friday, or I pull the funding. All of it. Let them explain to their cancer patients why the research wing is closing. Nadia's chest tightened, not with fear, with the cold, clear recognition of exactly what she was dealing with. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked. Vanessa's eyes filled. "Because you saved my life. Because my husband would have let me die on that table rather than let a woman he considers beneath him hold the knife. And because I've spent 12 years being afraid of him, and I'm done." She wiped her eyes carefully, mindful of the caller. "I'm leaving him. My lawyer, my real lawyer, not the one Vincent pays, is filing on Monday. But I need Vincent distracted. I need him focused on something other than me for long enough to get the protective order in place. You want me to be the distraction. I want you to be the truth. Use the recording. Use the communications. Hold him accountable. And while he's fighting for his reputation, I'll be fighting for my life." They sat in the diner, the surgeon and the patient, the woman who'd been spat on and the woman who'd been hit, bound together by a man who'd tried to break them both and failed, because he'd underestimated the one thing money couldn't buy: solidarity. Nadia held the USB drive in her palm. "I'm going to need a lawyer." "I have a name," Vanessa said. "She's very good, and she doesn't like billionaires." Monday morning, Nadia arrived at the hospital carrying two things: her surgical bag and a letter from the law offices of Catherine Okafor, Esquire. The letter was addressed to Helen Torres, Richard Carr, and the full board of directors of St. Raphael's Medical Center. It laid out the facts in the precise, devastating language that good lawyers use when they want the reader to understand that every word has been chosen for maximum legal impact. The assault. 14 witness statements. Photographic documentation of the bruise. The preserved scrubs with biological evidence. The conference room recording, obtained legally since Virginia was a one-party consent state and Nadia had been present in the room when it was made. Vincent's text to Carr threatening to pull funding if Nadia wasn't terminated. Carr's response agreeing to handle the situation. The letter requested 3 things. First, immediate dismissal of the complaint against Dr. Vasquez, with a formal letter of apology from the hospital administration. Second, permanent revocation of Vincent Ashford's donor privileges, including naming rights, board influence, and preferential treatment for family members. Third, referral of the assault to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The letter concluded with a single paragraph that Catherine Okafor had written with, Nadia suspected, particular relish. Should the hospital fail to act on these requests within 72 hours, Dr. Vasquez is prepared to file a civil lawsuit against St. Raphael's Medical Center for failure to protect its staff, against Vincent Ashford for assault and battery, and against Richard Carr personally for conspiracy to retaliate against a medical professional who reported workplace violence. Additionally, the conference room recording and Mr. Ashford's communications will be provided to every major news outlet in the state. Helen Torres read the letter in her office. Then she called an emergency board meeting. Richard Carr read the letter on his phone while sitting in the clubhouse after a round of golf. He called Vincent immediately. "We have a problem," Carr said.
"Handle it."
"Vincent, she has the recording. She has your text to me. She has 14 witnesses and biological evidence. This isn't a complaint we can bury. This is a nuclear weapon pointed at both of us." For the first time in the conversation, Vincent went quiet. "What do you mean, she has my texts?" "Your texts to me. The ones about pulling funding, the ones about getting rid of her. She has them, Vincent. I don't know how, but she has them. That's not possible. Those were private communications. Clearly they weren't. Vincent's breathing changed. Faster. The sound of a man whose control over a situation had just evaporated. I'll fix this, Vincent said. How? I'll talk to her. Offer her money. Everyone has a price. Vincent, you spat on this woman and she still saved your wife's life. I don't think she has a price. The board meeting happened on Wednesday. Nadia wasn't present. Catherine had advised her to let the letter do the work. But Dr. Keene was there, and he told her afterward what happened. Richard Carr tried to frame it as a mutual misunderstanding. Helen Torres, who had clearly spent the past 48 hours finding her backbone, presented the witness statements and the bruise photographs. The hospital attorney, who had read Catherine Okafor's letter and understood exactly how outgunned they were, recommended full compliance with all 3 requests. Carr argued. He argued for 40 minutes about donor relations, about institutional funding, about the complexity of the situation. He never once mentioned that a surgeon had been assaulted. He never once said Nadia's name. Then Helen Torres played the recording. The room heard Vincent Ashford scream at a doctor who'd just finished a 12-hour surgery. They heard him threaten her. They heard the sound of her being slammed into a wall. They heard the silence that followed the spit. And they heard Nadia's voice, steady and unbroken, explaining that she was the only surgeon qualified to save his wife's life. The vote was unanimous. Complaint dismissed. Formal apology issued. Ashford's donor privileges revoked. Referral to the district attorney. Carr abstained, then resigned from the board the following day, citing personal reasons. Vincent Ashford was arrested on a Friday morning. Not at home, at Ember, a restaurant on the Upper East Side where he was having breakfast with a client. 2 detectives approached his table, showed their badges, read the charges: assault and battery. Vincent's face went through the familiar sequence: rage, disbelief, the scramble for control. "Do you know who I am?" "We do, Mr. Ashford," the detective said. "That's why we're here." He was handcuffed in front of a restaurant full of people who had spent their lives trying to get his attention. Now they had it. The case never went to trial. Vincent's criminal defense attorney, a man who charged $1,500 an hour, reviewed the recording, the witnesses, the biological evidence, and the text messages, and told Vincent what no one had told him in decades. "You're going to lose." Vincent pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and battery. He received 2 years probation, mandatory anger management, a $50,000 fine, and a restraining order keeping him away from St. Raphael's Medical Center and all of its staff. Vanessa's divorce was finalized 6 months later. The prenup, which Vincent's lawyers had designed to be ironclad, was voided when Catherine Okafor presented evidence of physical abuse: the backhand at the charity event, documented by a valet who had seen the bruise and kept quiet for 3 years until Vanessa's lawyer found him. Vanessa received the house, the accounts, primary custody of their 2 children, and a settlement generous enough that she would never need to depend on anyone again. She called Nadia the day the divorce was final. "It's done," she said. "How do you feel?" "Terrified? Free? Both?" "That sounds about right." "Nadia, thank you. Not just for the surgery, for being the person who wouldn't bend. He's been bending people his whole life. You were the first one who stayed straight." Nadia leaned back in her office chair. Through the window, she could see the parking lot where ambulances came and went.
carrying people whose lives depended on the skill and courage of strangers they'd never met. "I didn't do it to be brave," Nadia said. "I did it because it was right." "Same thing," Vanessa replied softly. "Same thing." Nadia hung up. She looked at the surgical schedule on her desk. 3 cases tomorrow. A cervical fusion at 7 a.m., a spinal tumor at noon, a consult at 4 p.m. She picked up her pen, started her notes. On the wall behind her desk hung a framed photograph. Her mother, a seamstress in El Paso, standing outside the shop where she'd worked for 40 years. Her hands were rough, her posture tired, her smile enormous. Her mother had told her once, when Nadia was 14 and crying because a boy at school said girls couldn't be doctors, "Mija, the people who tell you what you can't do are the same people who will need you most. Don't let them forget it." Nadia hadn't forgotten. And Vincent Ashford would never forget either. The surgeon he spat on. The woman he tried to destroy. The doctor who held his wife's spine in her hands and chose to heal instead of harm. She was still here, still operating, still saving lives that belonged to people who would never know her name. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.